Welcome to JCATS, a program that seeks to introduce Japanese, contextualized literature and ideas for use by missionaries and anyone that seeks to share the gospel with Japanese people.
日本人から聞く日本のキリスト教。
Hey, welcome to JCATS. Today I have a special man with me. A while back we talked about Kosuke Koyama, who is a famous theologian and writer. He wrote Water Buffalo Theology. Today we have Kohei Koyama.
Not so famous.
Not almost famous. Almost famous, and he can tell you about that. Almost famous, yeah. So Kohei is a missionary with a missionary organization, one of the JEMA groups. And we met when we were both working in Iwate after the 3/11, for a number of years after the 3/11 incidents, disasters, and have since chatted a bit about contextualization. So I wanted to ask Kohei to share why contextualization is interesting to him. But first, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. I understand you grew up in Japan and you did not become a Christian in Japan. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and then also what you thought about religion in general growing up?
Okay. I was born and raised in Tokyo, Mitaka city. I would say it's very typical Japanese, it's not non-Christian, totally non-Christian environment. There was Kamidana, which is like a Shinto god, and then also Butsudan, which is like the more Buddhist, like an ancestral worship kind of, praise. Oh, actually I didn't have it that in more grandparents' house, but somebody had a wedding, this Christian wedding, and New Year we go to Shinto temple for the fortune for that year, and then if somebody die, it will be done by Buddhist way. So I don't know, some people heard the phrase Japanese were born as a Shinto and marry as a Christian and die as a Buddhist, kind of cynical things. But I think I'll say that it described the typical Japanese religious environment, I would say. So there's when I look back my life, there was a seed a little bit everywhere. Like I think when I was in elementary school, there was Tondera House no Daiboken. It's a Christian anime. Was broadcasted for 2 years, and for some reason I was watching it and very interestingly watching that.
I think we call that Superbook.
Oh, is that what you call?
Anybody like 40 years old or older, like me, would probably remember Superbook in the States. Yeah. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, no, actually, when I look back, it's almost a miracle that I watched that because it's only broadcasted for 2 years, and I was watching it. And then went to England because of my dad's job. And I went to the English-speaking class for a year. The local English-speaking, school, and there was a scripture class in the King James version. And I didn't speak English at all, and I didn't even know yours, and then that book called The ID, and it's like totally difficult. So my mom bought the Japanese Bible. That's the first time I got the Bible. Went to Japanese boarding school in England, and that was Rikkyo, which is more Episcopal kind of mission school. So there was many service, so there was a little seed there. But anyway, I graduated all the way to university in Japan, I don't know how much you want me to explain from here, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you mentioned while we were talking before that you went to Keio University, and maybe the typical expectation was that you would become a salaryman after that. But then you followed your dream, you said, and you went to America. I think people would be interested to hear about what that dream was.
Yeah, I wanted to. Only thing I enjoy through when I was a kid is sports. Baseball. Growing up, baseball. That's the only things. But when I went to England, I had to quit baseball, which is shocking things. And that's when I started playing soccer and golf, and that was golf team in high school and college. So, like, I had this crazy thought. I just want to follow my passion, basically, and a little bit of something actually was said back in junior high in the Japanese boarding school. I don't remember anything. All the message. One message that chaplain said was, the most important things in your life is faith and hope and love. That's all I remember. And when I was 22, all of a sudden that word came back to me, and I just interpret that three things by my own interpretation. Maybe faith is believing yourself, hope is having dream, and love is love. Whatever. Maybe so I relate to someday if I have a loving family. That's my goal, kind of thing. The most important things. So that really pushed. Some reason that pushed me to forget that this Japanese like golden path. Gakureki shakai, what we call. Graduate the most popular university famous university and become a elite salaryman. It was hard. It was a huge almost courage. I don't know, scary decision that I made in my life. My dad's jaw dropped when I said that I wanted to go to US and become a professional golfer, but I did. And interesting enough, just before I leave to US, somebody gave me, she's actually an unbeliever, but she gave me Ayako Miura's book. And so that's when I started reading Ayako Miura's book in States. And, because that book wasn't that famous book, but it was a lot of essays. But that drew me to read other famous books like Freezing Point, Hyoten, Michiariki. I think English translation is Wind is Whirling or something, and then the Shiokari Pass, Shiokari Toge. Those books definitely influence and really draw me to Jesus eventually.
Yeah, that's interesting. So for anybody who's wondering, Miura Ayako, many of you probably know, is a Japanese Christian novelist who was very influential, and a number of her books were, or at least one or two, were turned into serialized television shows and movies that were very popular, I want to say in the 80s and 90s. And she continues to have an impact today. A lot of people learn about faith in the Christian God by reading Miura Ayako's novels. So that's just the background there. Yeah, so that's interesting. You were in the States, but you were reading Miura Ayako's novels, and that was a big factor in you coming to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So then you were in the States. You went to school. You didn't quite become a professional golfer, but fairly close, almost famous. So
No, not even close.
So that's cool. But and then you got married and you started a family, and then you came back to Japan. Oh, so I met you in Iwate, but it seems like you had been back to Japan maybe a number of times in the meantime. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you about your impression of the church in Japan, having come to Christ outside of Japan and then coming back. What were your impressions of the church or religion? What were your thoughts about that kind of stuff?
So first time I came back to Japan as a believer, only a year after I became a believer, which is when I was 26. It was scary because I didn't know any Christians in Japan. And only thing I know, I was doing the BSF. I don't know, a lot of people know Bible Study Fellowship, and I knew, so there was in Tokyo, so I went to Harajuku to BSF, and I met a guy, and he's an Asian Access guy, which is my organization, but his name is, I don't know, I shouldn't say his name, I don't know, but I met him, and he suggested to go to which is like a more American church. So and that was more comfortable because it's like a more American church. So and so it's kind of the way I feel like so I'm not, when I'm coming back to Japan, I didn't really go to Japanese church, but yeah, I thought a lot that I just wonder, like coming back also, like I was totally in love with Jesus. Hopefully I am still, but I really want to share the gospel to Japanese people, and going to the topic towards the contextualization, but like I was wondering, having this expat community, I a little bit question, is this really the way we should share the gospel? And might be going too ahead, but like I think so many Japanese people has the mindset of Christianity is a Western religion or Western God, which I don't think is true. It's God of universe, obviously, but and it's much more familiar to Japanese than many people think. So going to the English speaking church, I thought maybe it's not a most effective, or like at least bringing of course there are many people who is interested in America or English, so that's good for them, but really for it to really contextualize the Japanese culture. This is only as a first year as a Christian, so these are thoughts I couldn't probably verbalize yet, but I think there was lots of question marks that I had.
Yeah, and thinking about it, if we were to fast forward to when around the time that we met in Iwate, you, as I understand it, you went to Iwate because you had training in physical therapy, and you were hoping to help a lot of the triple disaster survivors using physical therapy. So that, as I remember, it was an area where people were not coming to Christ because they liked America. It's a very rural area, and if you, I remember visiting a hospital in Iwate, and one of the patients, because I was doing kind of like just a sort of a care ministry with the Japanese group that wasn't even a Christian group. I was using it to learn Japanese, to improve my Japanese. And one of the patients, who was probably an 80-year-old man up in Iwate, was looking at me like he'd seen a ghost or something, because apparently it was one of the first times he'd seen an American since World War II. That's the kind of level of rural, and this was the city side of Iwate. Now, you were mostly working with people on the coast. So thinking about how you had to adjust your approach to share Jesus with that level of people that had that level of connection with the West. So completely divorced from the idea of attraction to Christianity because of the West, I imagine. How did you try to connect those people with Christianity?
Well, first and foremost, I think the difficult part is accent. I was born and raised in Tokyo. In especially Iwate coast, there was a heavy accent, and there's one guy that it took for me a year to even understand. I'm fully native Japanese, by the way, just to let you know. But like it took a year to understand what he was saying. But I think one thing was helpful, like especially in the disaster relief, all we are told is just listen, right? Like, listening is a ministry, it's by itself, so of course I took that approach, and I think it's just not relief work. I think in terms of contextualization, first thing we should do is listen to the local people, obviously, to get to know them. And that ministry itself, I was in the Ippo Cafe ministry, which is, basically people in the local area come, and it's easy to talk. So and I think also I came in maybe after 3 years of disaster as a long term, but at that time already I think Christian had a in general, did a wonderful job, right? So earned the trust of the people in the community. So it's already paved the way for us to talk a little bit about Christianity. I mean, a little bit, much easier than, is I'm relatively speaking than, used to be, I think, what I heard from. But then again, still, I think the first step for me was, just listen. And that is, I think, is a key for, I think, many missionary endeavor, I think. But
Yeah, that's a great point, I think. The last question I have written down for you is, why do you think contextualization is necessary in Japan? And are there any examples of the kind of contextualization that you think would be beneficial? So, what do you think, in what ways do you think church or evangelism might look more, or might feel more Japanese or less foreign to Japanese people?
There's many things. So the reason why I think is contextualization, like I kind of touch upon it a little bit. First thing I think it definitely is like, I realize, many Japanese people think is foreign God, and that's kind of unfortunate, but as you kind of mentioned in a podcast already, like I think, there's always many people always ask, like, why do you think the Japanese Christianity is so low, and I heard many different reasons, in which doesn't sit well. It's like, it's about World War II. It could be Japanese are so rich and they don't need God, or what else? Like, it's a spiritual stronghold, or like some, because we worship Shinto God, or all those things. But at least, it might be true. I really want to ask the same question to God someday. But these things, everything's point to unbelievers, which is, to me, is very unpractical, because I can't really change unbelievers. I mean, God can, but through us. And the reason why I think is contextualization is really it's about, we Christians need to be changed. I feel, we have to maybe rethink, what the gospel is, what it means to contextualize the gospel, and even just simple, things that we always, many people talk about, is, the one of the biggest important command by Jesus is love one another, right? And be united, whether, beyond our denomination, beyond our culture. I think love of Christ, Jesus said, if you love one another, right, like, people will know that you are my disciple, Jesus' disciple. So it's those things about contextualization, is loving one another is about, we need to be changed, right? Rather than we force unbeliever to change, and at least what the Bible or Jesus seemed to me saying is, when we change, the people will know that Jesus is a Christ. Or when we united, John chapter 17 also talk about Jesus pray, if just like the Father and the Son is one, we will be one. And of course, unfortunately, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say too much, but in American churches, maybe in Japan as well, I guess, we are not the great example of being one, I guess. Of course, it's a long discussion that what it means to be one, but it doesn't mean necessarily we have the same theology, I don't think, but
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a real valid point. Yeah. Well, those are some great insights. Appreciate your time. I know you're about to head back up and drive for another 5 hours or so. So thank you for taking time to talk with us, and perhaps we can do it again sometime.
Sure.
So, and thanks for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the episode, Kohei mentions a couple of materials that he found helpful in bringing him to Christianity. First, he mentioned a TV show called Tondera House. I mentioned that that's Japanese Superbook. It is not Japanese Superbook. It is very similar to Japanese Superbook. Tondera House no Daiboken. The flying house's great adventures, I guess, is about a little boy and a little girl and a robot, and does Bible stories just like Superbook, the old Superbook did. It's very difficult to find online. I wasn't able to find any episodes. You can find the old Superbook stuff on YouTube, like many episodes of it. Tondera House ran like 52 episodes in 82 and 83, I think. So that's what Kohei was talking about. I wouldn't know how to find it. Some places are selling DVDs for like $60 or something, and those are probably just a few episodes each. So anyway, that's where he mentioned Tondera House. Miura Ayako is a Japanese Christian novelist. Was a Japanese Christian novelist, published probably more in the 70s and 80s. The 3 books that Kohei read that helped him understand Christianity better were Freezing Point, Shiokari Pass, and what was published in English as The Wind is Howling. So if you want to read any of those 3 books, they're all available in English and Japanese, but the English titles are Freezing Point, Shiokari Pass, and The Wind is Howling. The author is Miura Ayako. So those are the resources that he mentioned.